I woke up to the faint, rhythmic beeping of machines and the antiseptic sting in the air. My eyelids were heavy, stubbornly refusing to open at first, as though they had been glued shut by months of sleep. Each shallow breath felt alien, each heartbeat a reminder that I was alive when I shouldn't have been. The world outside the hospital walls was a haze I couldn't yet touch, smell, or comprehend. My body felt both fragile and foreign, as though I had been pieced back together with invisible threads that could snap at any moment. When my eyes finally adjusted, I realized the room was unnervingly quiet. The sterile walls were bare, and the faint sunlight seeping through the blinds did nothing to warm the space. No colorful get-well cards, no flowers, no stuffed animals lined the windowsill, no family chatter, no soft footsteps, no familiar voice calling my name. Only the hum of the machines and the distant echo of nurses' footsteps in the corridor. I scanned the room, hoping for some trace of familiarity, some sign that anyone had come for me while I was trapped in this endless sleep. There was nothing. No dad, no siblings. No one I recognized. Only a plastic chair pushed against the wall and a small, folded piece of paper sitting on the bedside table. My hands trembled as I reached for it, my fingers brushing the cold paper as if it might bite. I unfolded it and read the words, my heart faltering with every letter. Wu stopped paying. Good luck. Dad, the words felt like a punch to the chest, a betrayal I wasn't prepared to face. No explanation, no apology, no sign of worry for the child who had survived, who had come back from the edge of death, who had awakened to find herself abandoned. I sat there, staring at the note, the paper trembling in my hands. My vision blurred, and for a long moment, I couldn't breathe properly. The room seemed to shrink around me, and a deep, hollow ache filled my chest. Tears came, hot and relentless, spilling down my cheeks as the reality sank in. I had always believed my father loved me, that my siblings cared, that my home was a sanctuary. But here I was, lying in a hospital bed after months of being trapped in a coma, and the people who were supposed to protect me had chosen to vanish. They had left me alone, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience, a problem to be ignored until it resolved itself. I cried for what felt like an eternity. I cried for the days lost, for the time stolen from me, for the countless nights spent dreaming of faces that would never come back. I cried for the trust that had been broken, for the love that had been denied. My body shook with grief and anger, the tears carving hot trails down my cheeks, and still, the room remained silent, unfeeling, and unyielding. And then, just as the despair began to swallow me whole, the door clicked open. I startled at the sound, my hands still clutching the note. In the doorway stood my lawyer, Mr. Hemsley, his expression calm and composed, as though he had expected this moment all along. Behind him was a man I did not recognize, tall and poised in a charcoal suit, with eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "Well," Hemsley said, his voice cutting through the quiet like a knife, "that explains part of it." He glanced at the note in my hands and raised a brow, a slight knowing smile tugging at his lips. "Your father made a mistake," he added slowly, almost triumphantly. The man in the suit stepped closer, his gaze fixed on me, steady and unnerving. "They forgot," he said softly, "who you really are." The words pierced through me like shards of ice and fire all at once. My pulse quickened, confusion and curiosity colliding inside me. I didn't understand. I wanted to scream, to ask, to cry some more. But all that came out was a fragile whisper. What do you mean?" Hemsley pulled up a chair, his movements deliberate and precise, while the stranger remained standing, a silent pillar of something I didn't yet comprehend. "It means," the lawyer said gently, "that your father's abandonment isn't the whole story. There's more to you, and he just made the biggest mistake of his life." My chest tightened and a shiver ran down my spine. Somewhere, deep inside, a seed of something dangerous and powerful had been planted, and I realized, even then, that my life had just begun, but it would never be the same again. The man in the suit introduced himself as Daniel Lorne, and the moment he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to bend the air around him. He wasn't just a stranger. He was someone who knew secrets I had never been allowed to learn, secrets my father had buried like poisonous roots beneath the foundation of my life. I tried to speak, to form words, but my throat felt raw and unfamiliar, as if the very act of talking had been lost in the months I'd been trapped in darkness. You knew my mother," I whispered finally, each word heavy with disbelief. Daniel's eyes softened, though they remained sharp, calculating. "I knew her very well, better than you ever will, perhaps, and she left something for you, something your father tried to steal." The room tilted slightly, my mind spinning. My father had always told me my mother had abandoned us, that she left nothing but debts and disappointment. I had grown up believing that her absence was proof of her disregard, that any love she might have had for me was irrelevant. But Daniel's words unraveled that lie in an instant, replacing it with something far more dangerous, the possibility that my entire life had been manipulated. "She left something for me," I asked, my voice trembling, a mixture of hope and terror curling in my chest. "Yes," Daniel said, his tone firm yet gentle. "You are the rightful heir to everything she built, everything she worked for, everything she believed in. Your father hid it from you. He forged papers, manipulated legal documents, created a life for you that kept you blind to your own legacy. And when you fell into that coma," he paused, and I could see the unsaid truth hanging like a shadow. "He thought you might never wake up. It was the perfect plan to erase you." I felt my stomach twist. My father had abandoned me. Yes, but this was deliberate. My life, my identity, even my survival had been a battlefield I hadn't known I was on. My heart ached with anger, with disbelief, with a grief that cut deeper than any wound my body bore. I had trusted him, I had loved him, and all that love, all that trust had been used against me. I swallowed hard, my hands clenching the sheets beneath me. All those years, everything he told me about her, it was a lie. Daniel nodded solemnly. "A lie to protect himself, and to keep what was yours from ever reaching you. But the moment you woke up, everything changed. You are no longer invisible. You are no longer powerless." I felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a spark I hadn't recognized in myself before. Strength, resolve, the faint, dangerous sense that I could finally fight back. My body, though weak, no longer felt like a prison. My mind, though foggy from months of unconsciousness, was sharper than it had been in years. And for the first time, I saw a path that led away from helplessness and toward reclamation. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your father underestimated you. He thought the world could keep you small, keep you dependent, keep you weak. He was wrong. You are more than the girl he abandoned in a hospital room. You are the daughter of someone extraordinary. And now you have the chance to claim what is rightfully yours." I wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse into relief and anger all at once, but I simply sat there, shaking as the truth settled like fire inside me. My life had been stolen, yes, but it could also be rebuilt. My mother's name, her legacy, the power that had been kept from me, it was within reach. And my father, I asked finally, my voice quieter than I expected. "What about him?" Daniel's expression did not waver. "That is up to you. But know this, he has already lost. He may have forgotten who you are, but now he will learn the cost of underestimating you." The room felt smaller, tighter, as the weight of the revelation pressed down on me. I was alive, yes, but I was no longer just surviving. I was awakening, not from the coma, but from the illusion of a life that was never mine. And somewhere deep inside, I realized that the little girl who had cried for hours in an empty hospital room was gone. In her place stood someone who was beginning to remember her own power. For the first time since waking, I didn't cry. Instead, I sat up straighter, feeling the slow, steady thrum of possibility inside me. Daniel watched quietly like a sentinel as I allowed the anger, the betrayal, and the hope to intertwine. And for the first time, I understood that my story, my real story, was only just beginning. Recovery became a battleground I was determined to win. My body ached in ways I had never imagined. Muscles that had forgotten how to move, joints stiffened by months of immobility, and a mind that wavered between fog and clarity. Each step I took in physical therapy was a small rebellion, a statement that I was not broken beyond repair. Daniel and Mr. Hemsley were constant presences, though they allowed me the space to reclaim myself on my own terms. Daniel's quiet guidance, paired with Hemsley's meticulous organization, gave me a sense of control I had not felt in years. I was no longer a passive participant in the life my father had dictated. I was the architect of my own future. As my body strengthened, I began to confront the financial and legal labyrinth my father had constructed to keep me powerless. It was staggering, the extent of his deceit. Accounts opened in my name and siphoned into his control. Documents forged to make it appear as though I had no claim to my mother's estate. Legal maneuvers meant to bury me beneath bureaucracy while he lived comfortably off what was rightfully mine. Anger flared every time I saw evidence of it, sharp and unrelenting, but Daniel reminded me that patience was more potent than rage. My father had underestimated the most important thing about me, that I would wake, that I would see the truth, and that I would act. I spent hours poring over documents, reviewing every account, every signature, every transfer. Each piece of evidence built a tapestry of betrayal so vast it almost made my head spin. My father had tried to erase me, but he had left traces, patterns of arrogance and oversight that made his undoing inevitable. I realized that this was not just about money. It was about reclaiming my identity, my name, my life, and I would not leave a single stone unturned. At first, I hesitated. The thought of facing my father and siblings filled me with a mixture of dread and exhilaration. How could people I had once trusted betray me so completely? How could they so casually discard a child they claimed to love? And yet, beneath the anger there was clarity. I did not need revenge through destruction or humiliation. Their downfall would come from the truth, from the law, from the very evidence they had ignored while stealing from me. Step by step, I began to rebuild not only my life but also my power. My physical strength returned, my mind sharpened, and my spirit grew resilient in a way I had never imagined. Every meeting with Daniel and Hemsley revealed more possibilities, more ways to assert my rights, more ways to hold my father accountable. I began to see the world not as a place where I was a victim, but as a stage where I could dictate my own terms. The first confrontation came quietly. Letters, legal notices, and investigations started arriving at my family's addresses, subtle at first, almost casual. Bank accounts were frozen, assets were traced, and inquiries opened that they could not ignore. Their shock was palpable. I heard whispers of disbelief, arguments erupting behind closed doors, and the frantic scratching of phone calls that would go unanswered. My father called once, then twice, his voice a mixture of panic and disbelief. I did not answer. My siblings sent messages pleading, negotiating, demanding explanations. I did not respond. Each refusal was deliberate. Each silent refusal was a reminder that I was no longer the powerless child they had discarded. I was awake, aware, and reclaiming everything they thought they had stolen. The slow, methodical unraveling of their comfortable lives became my instrument, not out of malice, but out of justice. Every letter, every legal motion, every carefully placed investigation was a step toward reclaiming what was mine, and with each step, the girl who had once lain helpless in a hospital bed grew stronger. By the time the first hearings began, I was no longer scared. I was prepared. My anger had been tempered into focus, my grief transformed into determination. I had learned that true power did not lie in shouting or striking, but in knowing your value and insisting on it. And for the first time in my life, I felt the exhilarating clarity of control. I would not simply survive. I would rise, and my father, my siblings, and everyone who had doubted me would finally understand the cost of underestimating me. The day of the final hearing arrived with a calm that felt almost surreal. I walked into the courthouse, each step measured, each breath deliberate. My body was fully recovered, my cane left behind as a silent gesture to those who had once counted me out. I felt the weight of months of preparation, of therapy, of legal battles, settle into a steady confidence. I was no longer the fragile girl who had awoken to an empty room. I was whole, and I was unstoppable. The courtroom buzzed quietly as people murmured, recognizing the name that had been hidden for so long. My father sat at the defense table, smaller somehow, shadows of guilt etched into the lines of his face. My siblings fidgeted beside him, their expressions a mixture of fear, shame, and disbelief. They had spent so long imagining that I would remain powerless, imagining that the accident, the coma, and the years of manipulation had buried me for good. They were wrong. When the judge called the session to order, I felt a curious calm settle over me. The evidence was clear, painstakingly gathered and presented by Mr. Hemsley and overseen by Daniel's careful eye. Documents, records, and testimonies painted a complete picture of betrayal, theft, and deliberate deception. I watched as each piece fell into place, a silent, unassailable testament to the truth. My father's face paled with each revelation, the arrogance he had relied on finally crumbling. When the judge delivered the verdict, my heart did not race. I had expected this moment, prepared for it, and yet the words carried a quiet satisfaction that surpassed any anticipation. Restitution was ordered, all stolen assets were returned, and my mother's estate was fully restored to me. Legal penalties were assigned, and restraining orders placed where necessary. My father and siblings had been stripped of every ill-gotten gain. I felt a strange mixture of triumph and detachment. I did not revel in their suffering. My revenge was not in cruelty nor in humiliation. It was in the reclaiming of what was mine, in standing tall and asserting my identity against those who had tried to erase it. The satisfaction came in knowing that they could not deny the truth, that they had been exposed, and that they could no longer manipulate, intimidate, or control me. My father's gaze finally met mine. There was panic there, yes, but also recognition of the daughter he had underestimated, the child he had abandoned, and the woman I had become. He opened his mouth, perhaps to beg, perhaps to apologize, but I shook my head. Words were unnecessary. He had done enough damage, and it was no longer mine to mend. I stepped out of the courtroom into the sunlight, Daniel by my side, the city stretching endlessly before me. For a moment I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, letting the warmth and freedom fill me. This was the life I had been denied, the future I had been robbed of, and now it was mine to claim. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer crushed me. It had forged me into something stronger, sharper, and unyielding. As we walked away from the courthouse, Daniel spoke softly, almost reverently. "What will you do now?" I smiled faintly, feeling the surge of possibility coursing through me. "I live," I said simply. "I finally live for myself. Everything else is theirs to face." I glanced back once at my father, at the siblings who had once defined my world. They were smaller now, diminished not by me, but by their own choices, and for the first time I understood what true revenge meant. Not cruelty, not vindication, but rising above. They had chosen their path, I had chosen mine. The wind brushed my face as I stepped onto the street, each step a declaration. I was alive, I was free, I was whole. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, was behind me, and the future, my future, was finally mine.